I'm curious to hear your thoughts, because right now the IDF says the war is continuing, but there's one brigade operating inside Gaza, the Nahal Brigade. And so what does this mean for the future of the operation in Gaza?
At this level of deployment in Gaza, and with this tactic of surgical strikes here and there, that's a recipe for a forever war. And I'm not the first to suspect that some people on the political side in Israel want to prolong the war for political reasons. I think the moment approaches where a decision will have to be made. I was talking to a military analyst earlier today who argued that even though you can certainly present the war as a success, and there have been successes, obviously, Hamas has been much diminished and degraded. You're at the point where if this is what you've done in 6 months, it's time to call it a day, because Israel's fundamentally hamstrung by the fact that there's about 100 hostages, hopefully most of them still alive, held by Hamas.
Out of the U.S. this week stating that's could not be the case, that most of them are alive.
Well, there are various reports that maybe close to half might no longer be alive. But either way, it's still 60 hostages who are alive, and Israel can't really go in there. The idea that eradicating Hamas fully and rescuing the hostages by military pressure go hand in hand, as opposed to contradict, was a logical fallacy. And after 6 months, it's difficult to dispute that that's really how it's looking. So there is an argument that says Gaza has been punished quite stupendously. Hamas has been degraded very significantly. Israel will accept the deal that is on the table by Hamas, receive all the hostages and pull out of Gaza and end the war. Now that is a tremendous defeat in a way, because that means it leaves Hamas standing and in charge in Gaza. That will give succor to jihadis all over the world. But if at that point Israel begins preparing for the next round, where it goes in without one hand tied behind its back because of the hostages, then you could argue that that is a more effective way to finish the job, as opposed to now, when finishing the job may mean killing the hostages. So I would say there certainly is an argument for doing that and instituting at that point going forward an absolute zero tolerance policy. Let the world know that the first molecule that steps out of line by Hamas in Gaza will re-trigger the war, and see if that doesn't cause them to be finally at last deterred. I would be assuming that it wouldn't, because they are nihilistic and they are jihadis, and that's in their DNA. I would assume the first rocket that violates the ceasefire would come, and that would then trigger a final invasion of Gaza, where you don't have the hostages hamstringing you.
What about the international pressure then? Because many people even are worried about a temporary ceasefire and how we might see more and more international pressure to continue to have more of a permanent ceasefire. But once Israel does pull out, it could be more difficult to then re-engage.
Sure. I mean, that's a concern. I wouldn't dismiss it. But on the other hand, as is usually the case in the Middle East, we're looking at the least bad option. Is the least bad option continuing the war as it is? With Israel being tarred and feathered, and the war being seen right now by much of the world is no longer legitimate. You could argue it either way, but I certainly think that there is value to public diplomacy, and Israel has really failed to explain itself to the world. So I would hope if we go into this new stage, and that might happen at some point, Israel just makes clear that we are prepared to call it a day unless we are attacked once more. And if we are attacked once more, we will finish the job, come what may. However many people choose to protest in the streets of London, we will do it. But it will certainly replenish Israel's highly depleted stock of international legitimacy.
And when it comes to the PA, and when you mentioned earlier in the broadcast plans for possibly Israel pulling out of Gaza, having Hamas continue to rule the Gaza Strip.
As one scenario.
As one scenario, let's say, then how would the PA fall into that?
My preferred option all along had been for Israel to openly state that their goal is to reinstate the PA in Gaza. If Israel pulls out without having done that, then obviously the PA does not have a role in Gaza, other than, by the way, to continue paying the salaries of civil servants in Gaza, which, weirdly, they continue to do. The government has refused to discuss this plan that Biden and much of the Arab world are proposing to integrate the PA back into Gaza as part of the day after plan. Israel, the many mistakes, among the many mistakes Israel's made, beginning with a complete breakdown and failure to act upon clear, actionable intelligence before October 7th, among the many mistakes has been a refusal to engage the world in its plan to reinstate the PA. Without denying that the PA has problems, they are the less bad option. Retaining Hamas in charge of Gaza has been something that Netanyahu for years has seen as having an advantage because it weakens the PA. So who knows? Perhaps the capitulation scenario I was describing before, which really is painful to contemplate, may be something Netanyahu himself actually prefers to finishing the job and reinstalling the PA, which really kind of would be his only option if he really did finish the job.